Welcome to our In the Blue. This is Dr. Cory Frogley, and I am joined with my co-host. We've got a team prepared for you today with Joseph Stith. And happy Olympics, Joseph. This is the Olympic season.
It is. It
You've been
is. You remember
catching
the
up on your
2002 Olympics here in Salt Lake? It doesn't seem like that long ago, was it?
future wife at the time, and I tell you, that was a magical time because she was actually working for the Olympics, and so I got to get into some of the behind the
Whoa.
scenes, and we got to go to the closing ceremonies, and I got to ride the skeleton run, which was insane, having that
No
ice that
way.
close to your face going 60
No.
miles per hour. Of
You
course, they didn't
rode
let me in
that.
at the top. They put me in at the junior Olympic entrance.
And weren't you
But
glad? Weren't you glad,
it's
right?
still, oh, I was so glad. It scared the pants off of me, but it
I
was
can
incredible.
imagine.
It
Yeah,
was incredible.
there's this excitement around the Olympic season, and it doesn't happen every year. So when it does
Yeah,
come, it's magical. But when it was here, it was just extra special.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, today is the Olympics, and Joseph is going to do a presentation for us today on leading your team to the gold. And that's what it's all about, is developing your leadership skills. And again, remember, Blue IQ is all about skills, tools of scalability. And you are your greatest tool of scalability. And that's what we're trying to build for you, is these opportunities. And this is a great presentation to share with your team lead. Because again, the more you can empower them to lead their teams and you kind of step away and lead them, that's where you begin to accomplish and duplicate yourself throughout your different facilities as you begin to open that. So, Joseph, I'm bringing up your presentation here, and let's do this.
Sounds great. Thank you, Corey. It's a pleasure to be back here. Um, you know, there are there's a concept that we have to keep reminding ourselves of that's so critical that we need to make sure that all managers and all leaders understand that there are three primary ways to lead or manage others, particularly people. We can lead and manage by observation. We can lead and manage by judgments, and we can use objectives to lead and manage people. Those three primary ways are critical to understanding the systems that we employ in order to manage people, and invariably by default, we tend to back away from objectives and rely on judgments and observation, and sometimes things can go sideways when we do that. To use the Olympics as a perfect example, since it's the Olympic season,
That's right.
there is a sport that everyone loves. In fact, it's the most beautiful, perhaps, sport to watch. When you think of ice skating, it
Just
is
watched some last
majestic.
night.
Did you? Yeah, they've been.
Yeah.
It's like for almost a week they go for the first week, and there's just so much to watch, and there's so many beautiful routines. And it's a favorite. It's like a flagship when you think about it, when you think of the Olympics. And yet, you never really know how well they did. You think you know, right? But
Right.
you think a great performance is one in which they don't fall down, and they can skate what you think is a flawless performance, and it's just so enjoyable to watch. And you think, oh my gosh, their scores are going to be through the roof, and yet you realize, oh my gosh, they did. How did that? How was that possible? And it's because, using ice skating as an example, ice skating requires judges to determine whether or not they won or lost. And then winning
Right.
and losing it's relative, right?
That's a
It's a
little subjective, isn't it?
it,
Yeah.
it is very subjective, and when you think of it that way, and some have argued that it isn't really a sport, that it's more of a dance with difficult
That-
moves.
Don't
And
tell the athletes that because you'll
no, we
offend them.
definitely
But
want to tell the athletes by any means. No, and I would never be accused of being a sportscaster, so I think we're safe.
Yeah, we're
But
safe.
at the same time, it requires judges to watch, to observe every move they make, and then judge how they think they did. And those scores were actually completely redid, if you know this, because of the skating scandal that was just after the 2002 Olympics. The backroom
Yeah,
politics that were accused of affecting the score. They had to change the
yeah.
scoring. And so
Mm.
imagine a sport in which the scores are now different than they were in 2012. That's just how
Wow.
subjective it is. But it continues, and people love the sport. But it is the greatest example of actually a combination of management by observation and management by judgment. And gymnastics is really close. It's not something as beautiful perhaps to watch as as the Winter Olympics ice skating. But gymnastics can be right up there in you think they did a good routine, but you have
Yeah.
to wait
Again,
until you see
a
the
little
score to
subjective
know, right?
because we're not experts, right? We can't,
Yeah.
as amazing as my ice skating is not, I'm horrible on the ice. Um, yeah, I don't know what's an amazing. It's beautiful, like you said, but
Yeah.
it is very subjective. I don't know who's winning and who's not.
Yeah, yeah. And we don't know one jump from another. That it's so highly technical that we have to rely on judges to tell us how well they did. But not so in ice hockey.
Yeah.
Ice hockey is the flip side of ice skating. Where one is subjective, ice hockey is completely objective. This is an example of
Yeah.
management by objective, completely opposite. So in other words,
Yeah.
if that puck breaks the goal, meaning that with the line drawn between the goalposts, and if it's at least below 4 feet, which is the top frame, if it makes it anywhere over that line, it's a point. It's a point. And the goal,
Yeah.
the net's there, doesn't have to touch the net, but the net is there so they don't have to chase it down, and they can actually make sure that it did in fact get inside the goal, because that puck can go so
Absolutely.
fast. Sometimes you couldn't
Right.
possibly see whether it was on this side or the other side of that goalpost. But there's no room for judgment except for whether or not it went inside the goal. So you don't have judges in the stands saying, that was such an easy shot. I mean, we're only going to give you half a point. That wouldn't be
Yeah.
tolerated in hockey, would it?
That would be, there would be a riot. The gloves would come
Exactly.
off, fists would come out.
That is for sure. They would just not in any way be tolerated. And nor do we have the opposite, where it was such a difficult shot. We're willing to give them 2 points. Can you imagine the opposing team's
No.
reaction?
Oh
That's
my
just
goodness.
wouldn't be tolerated. So
That's a funny thought.
it would there. You're right. It would be a riot. There's no question about it. There's another way to cause a riot in hockey, and that is actually to go and not see um, to not see your scoreboard. Can you imagine? Now we accept
Mm,
that. We accept that in hockey and in gymnastics, but we wouldn't
mm.
think about tolerating that for ice hockey. It's not that we can forget the score because we know the score, but we want to be able to see the score. It's not enough
In
to know
fact,
the score. You want to see the score.
I've been at a game, a basketball game, where the scoreboard went down in the middle of the game, and the
Great
whole
example.
audience gasped.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Yeah,
That's a great
like
example.
stop playing because
Oh yeah,
the scoreboard's not on, so
the
stop
playing
playing.
stops. Exactly.
Yeah,
Because the scoreboard is the focus central point. Absolutely
yeah.
important. Yeah, so those are great examples of the difference between the two. And so being able to visualize the score allows you to measure and boost performance. If they attempted to do hockey or perform hockey as in the same way that they did figure skating, would there be a difference in performance? Think about it. If you have team
It'd be a whole
members on
different
the
game.
team,
Be a
yeah,
completely different game.
it would be a completely different game. Can you imagine being on an opposing team and thinking to yourself, I wonder what the score is? Immediately that would affect your performance, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
And then with knowing that score, with always knowing what that score is, you know whether you're winning or you're losing. And a leader can then empower the team through reward systems and motivational opportunities. But there's nothing more motivating than knowing that the objective is clearly defined and you know it before anyone else does when you've crossed that finish line or that line
yeah,
for that whatever that period is. That is the
yeah.
greatest reward of all. That we often deny our team because we're not often as clear on the objectives as we should be.
Hmm. That's a great point. So in your training, what if you started by clearly defining the objective and worked backwards in the training of here's how you reach and exceed your objective?
Yeah,
That's kind of backwards from most training programs.
yeah, yeah, it really is. And yet, if you're truly leading by objectives, that's the way you would want to train,
Hmm.
with the scoreboard clearly present.
Yeah.
The next slide is an example of no,
This
there's a
one or the
slide
one that,
missing in there. Is there one more? There's one before this with the leading. Maybe she took
nope, you're
that
just
out.
going to have to tell us
That's
about
okay.
it.
No, let's do. So there's two areas there. There's a limitation in performance as a standard that we accept in sports. For instance, in figure skating, we know that the routine is 2 minutes 50 seconds, and they get two routines, but it's 2 minutes 50 seconds. There's no exceptions, right? And everybody
Yeah.
agrees to that there's a constraint within that measurement, right? And
Right, right.
in hockey, there are three, not like football four, there are three 20-minute periods. Everyone accepts those constraints. In business, it's the same way. There are 30 or 31 days in a month. When we don't produce what we need to in a month, we don't push it over, right? To just a few more
Right.
days into the next
Let's
month. Do we
just
do that?
stretch it a little bit
Yeah,
away.
we don't do that. The month ends
Yeah,
and the month
yeah,
has a beginning. And so just as in sports, we have a specific limitation in time that we accept in business as well. And sometimes we don't work within those constraints. For instance, knowing that there's a limitation there, we often don't realize that just missing a specific performance with just one patient, that we may have been able to check out better or schedule an appointment or maybe even
schedule
produce
sooner.
more if we understood the score, if we understood the limitations and taking advantage of every minute of every day with every patient that we see, would we score more by accepting those limitations as real as they are in business, as real as they are in sports?
Hmm.
That
I love that
limitation.
point.
That,
And
Go ahead.
expanding on that, so BlueIQ, we measure our KPIs, our key performance indicator, by the month. But then we have upstream metrics. We dissect that KPI into the weeks of that, contributing to the month. But
Mhm.
the upstream metrics that contribute to the team KPI, the scoreboard, it
Mhm.
is measured on a weekly basis. Because if you can drive the week, and one of the unique, powerful tools of BlueIQ is taking the week and breaking it down to the individual daily performance. In fact, we have goal tracking, which allows you to see, based upon how many hours you're open that day, how much you need to produce on the upstream metrics to make the monthly KPI stable. So this is where we're not just an analytical company. We
That's
are
right.
a team engagement and empowering tool so that they know their objectives, they know them down to the daily production, and by, like you said, so many patients are like, well, when would you like to come in for that next appointment? How about a month from now?
Yeah, yeah.
When does the doctor want to see them? And that's what you've got to enforce. Nope, the doctor's making a special exception to get you in later this week.
Hmm.
What's better for you, Thursday or Friday? You give them
Which
two choices.
perfect example, Corey, in accepting the fact that there is a measure of urgency in everything
Urgency.
that we do when we're checking that patient out. We could easily make it convenient for them and book them 1 or 2 months out, but the sense of
Yeah.
urgency that we need to drive the score is something we need to do in business as well as we do in sports. Which brings us to that focus of the scoreboard itself. That scoreboard is an essential element of leadership when you think about it. Corey, didn't you just tell me the other day that you were with a front desk or an office manager, and you were showing her some analytics that BlueIQ can produce some basic metrics, right? And you were amazed at the fact that she couldn't connect those to her performance within that office. Can you tell that story?
It was actually kind of shocking. And again, no offense to her because she's just not really familiar with Blue IQ. It was her first time
Sure.
seeing our analytic tools. She was more familiar with some of the other tools out there that are just more telling you some data and
Yeah.
some benchmarks. Doesn't break it down to a daily drive, and certainly you can't assign specific pieces of the practice to specific team members. So she sees a lot of these tools as the owner or her tool. Nothing about allowing certain metrics to be assigned to certain team members so they own their
Yeah.
part of
Yeah.
the contribution to the score. And so when I put it up on the screen, um, she thought she just didn't get it. She's like, I don't get the colors. I don't get the way it's laid out. It- and I just talked to her. I just wanted to hear her responses. Is then I started pointing some things to her, and it just didn't connect about engaging the team. She kept thinking this was just a tool for her and for the business owner. And that's
Mm,
really where Blue IQ has
yeah.
that scoreboard to show the team so they know exactly where they are in the given goal period, and are they on track? Are they behind? Are they ahead?
Mm-hmm.
How do we work together as a team so each team member knows their role and can perform at the level of expectation that the business needs them to perform to move a winning performance?
That's a great example. It's a little like her expecting the scoreboard to have just remained on the computer or in the office, and no one else needs to see this except those who
Yeah. Look at it in the morning and then turn it off.
and turn it off. That's right. But they would never do that in hockey. Never, never.
No, have the score on for the first period and then let's just turn it off.
And then let's turn it off. That's all we need. Yeah.
Yeah.
Conversely, I know that now I'm no sports expert, but in football, not that we're talking about football, but there are statisticians that are running statistics on every individual player, and each one of them knows what their personal stats are at any given time during their career. Now we don't
Yeah.
post those on the television for everyone to see, but the sportscasters certainly pull them up and they refer back to them when we think someone's had a really good day or a really good, game.
Right.
And
Yeah.
we can do that in business just as effectively as we see it done in sports. But we rob ourselves of that enthusiasm that comes from always knowing exactly what the score is at any given time during the day. Because we train someone and then we go on automatic pilot and we go until we hear otherwise, uh, assuming that everyone knows what they're doing. And those businesses, those practices that always know the score will always outwin and outperform those who simply have a scoreboard that comes on once during the morning huddle and then it's out of the way for them.
And you've made an incredible point, Joseph, because in our industries, there are other dashboards out there with morning huddle reports, right?
Hmm?
You've seen them.
Yep.
You name one other than BlueIQ that gives an end of the day report, because as we're seeing our data in real time, the team members can get a text or a PDF report of their contribution for that day,
Mm.
because that allows them to see what the ending score for the day was, and how to prepare for the next day. Sometimes we have to prepare ourselves for the next day. So to get an end of the day report that not only shows you here's how you completed the day and here's what you're facing tomorrow, gives them sometimes an 18-hour time frame to begin just putting it in the back of their head. What do I need to do tomorrow? How do I need to get organized?
Yep.
And
Yep.
start thinking like a business owner, because I know that's how I have a hard time sleeping at night because I'm thinking about a lot of those things. But the
Uh-huh.
team begins that culture. And when we celebrate those victories of those team members who come to the morning huddle already knowing what they need to do for that day, that's when it gets just this electric excitement of the team moving the production needle
Yes.
forward.
What a huge difference. What a huge difference that is in boosting team performance. And that also lends itself to an individual who wants to know at the end of the day whether I did win or lose. If the goal was discussed in the morning, I want to know where I ended. Did we win?
Yeah, yeah.
Too often we
How'd I
just do a
do?
morning huddle that talks about what the goal is and what we need to do, and then we're talking about that again tomorrow morning. But we never took the time to talk about whether or not we made goal. How well did we
Right.
win yesterday? It may have been $2,000 over goal, and we missed the opportunity to celebrate.
To celebrate it.
Yep.
Amen to that. Well,
So
these types of concepts and these leadership tools, we've got our leadership blog, and you can actually, if you don't want an email every week with different types, you can just subscribe to our leadership blog and receive these directly to your inbox every Thursday night. We prepare you, give you thoughts to chew on for the end of the week, and prepare you for the next week. Joseph has contributed to some of these. Other phenomenal authors across the industry have contributed to these. These are gold. I mean, driving your team to the goal. This is the goal that will develop you into the leader that you need to become. Any closing thoughts, Joseph?
I am so impressed by the quality of these blog posts. These are anything but fluff. I've really enjoyed reading these, and it just proves to me the investment that Blue IQ is continuing to invest in leadership skills and in helping doctors succeed in building their
Yeah,
business.
thank you.
Yeah.
Well, in that closing thought, remember, Blue IQ, tools of scalability, we knew time was of the essence. We wanted digestible data, meaning blogs you can digest literally over a cup of coffee, um, data that you can digest over a cup of coffee. That's why we send them to you in text form. We send you your data in PDFs. You don't have to log into the platform. I mean, you can get in there and go deep and do your analysis, but getting that scoreboard comes to you just on a constant rhythm for you, so that you and your team can be engaged in the business. So not only are you getting the digestible data, your team's getting the digestible they need, when they need it, where they need it, so they can drive a winning team.
Well said.
Joseph, thank you for being with me again. Love my co-host. Appreciate all he contributes. Big shout out to Tosh behind the scenes. She does an amazing job for us putting these together and helps us with the blog. So please, if you can, on our Facebook Live, put a big shout out to Tosh and give her some props, because we wouldn't be who we are without her. Remember, In the Blue every Friday, 9 p.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern. We absolutely love being with you and appreciate you being with our team, and grateful for contributing to what we're all about, which is helping you become the best you can be. So we will see you next week.